Malik was sitting at the table eating with his girlfriend Zara. The small diner where they sat was dimly lit with the soft hum of an old fan filling the silence. He was completely occupied with his phone, laughing and giggling as messages kept coming. He was unaware that his girlfriend Zara was sitting across from him at the table, her gaze fixed on the uneaten food in front of her. Zara said, "You are the busiest man I have ever known," and Malik responded, "The bills are paid, right?" He went right back to reading his messages and laughing. "Oh my God," Zara said, upset. "You don't have time for me anymore. You're gone all day, and when you're home, you're all day, and when you're home, you're on your phone." Zara got up from her chair, smiled, walked toward Malik, leaned in and gave him countless kisses to make him feel happy. "I would like to take a break from this relationship," Malik said to Zara. Zara turned and looked him dead in the eyes and said, "That's fine, but don't expect me to be here when you return from your break." Malik was very surprised because he was expecting her to beg him to stay. He grabbed his suit and left the house. Later that evening, when Malik came home from work, as he opened the front door and walked in, his wife, Amina, rushed towards him because she had not seen him in 3 days. The cozy living room smelled faintly of lavender from the air freshener she had used earlier. "I called you for days, but you did not pick up your calls," she said. Malik responded, "I am here now." He was rude and very disrespectful in his response. She did not mind his rudeness. She had prepared dinner hoping he would come back home, so she rushed off to warm the dinner and also prepared a bath for him. She was very excited that he was home and refused to focus on his bad behavior. She was all over her husband, trying to make him feel comfortable, but Malik felt irritated by his wife, so he pushed her away multiple times. A few minutes later, she called her friend Leela to tell her that her husband was home safe. Leela was so upset that Malik disappeared without any call or any information. She told her not to worry. When she hung up the phone, Amina went to take her husband's clothes to the laundry while he was taking a shower. She found some condoms in his pocket, which made her feel sad and worried, but she immediately picked herself up and left the room. She served her husband dinner like nothing had happened and kissed him goodnight. The next day, Malik drove to his side chick's house, Zara, to pick her up on a date. Zara looked so good and very sexy, and Malik was so happy to see her. They drove out to the club together, danced all night, and they could not keep their hands off each other. The club was alive with strobe lights and loud music that drowned out their laughter. Leela's friend spotted them together. She was surprised to see her friend's husband in the arms of another woman, so she quickly made a video of them. Meanwhile, at home, Amina was preparing a delicious meal for her husband. The aroma of jollof rice and fried plantains filled the small kitchen. She called him repeatedly, but he told her he was still at work. Leela called her and asked her about her husband. She responded that Malik was not back from work. Leela was quiet, then sent a video to her. When she watched the video, she was in total disbelief about what she just saw. She panicked and tried to call Malik's phone, but the phone was switched off. She sobbed intensely. She was so heartbroken and emotional that she tried to call her husband multiple times, but he did not pick up her calls. She was so sad she cried herself to sleep. In the wee hours of the morning, a phone call came in, and it was the hospital. Her husband was involved in a car accident due to drunk driving. She rushed to the hospital to see her husband. The sterile smell of antiseptics hit her as she entered the emergency room. He was lying there unconscious. She sat on the bed beside him in panic. She cried and prayed for her husband. After a few hours, he moved his legs while calling for his side chick Zara. When he called Zara's name 3 times, Amina asked him, "Who is Zara? I am your wife." Malik opened his eyes and stared at Amina for a few seconds. She was so confused and worried, so she tried to calm him down again. Malik felt irritated by her, so he grabbed her hands and flung them away, saying, "I'm in pain. I don't want to be bothered." Later that evening, the doctor discharged Malik. Amina took her husband home to care for him. She managed to help him into bed. He did not want his wife around him at all. He ordered her to bring his phone so he could make calls. When she left the room, Malik called Zara, his side chick, to check on her, but Zara did not pick his calls. The following morning, Malik panicked as he had not heard from Zara since the accident, so he got up and drove to Zara's house to check on her as she was not answering his calls. Zara refused to open the door because Malik had abandoned her at the hospital. Her children rushed to the door to open it for him. He was happy to see his children and his side chick Zara, but Zara did not want to see Malik. "You abandoned me at the hospital," Zara yelled at Malik. "We have been together for 6 years and have 2 children together, but you refuse to commit to this relationship. You're married to another woman who has no child for you." Zara was very angry, so she gave Malik an ultimatum of 1 month to divorce his wife. She threatened to take his children out of the country and deny him access to them. Malik loved his children. He did not want to lose them, so he drove home in a rush to figure things out for himself. He could not afford to lose his children. He went to his bedroom to think of ways to break the news to his wife. Amina came to check on him. She was so gentle, loving, and sweet. The more she tried to be positive and good, the angrier Malik became. In the heat of the argument, he snapped and told Amina that he wanted a divorce. Amina froze in her steps and her head spun. Amina stood in shock, not knowing what to do. Malik spoke arrogantly, saying that he was filing for a divorce and she should be ready to sign the papers. Amina was too shocked to cry. A million thoughts ran through her mind. What will happen? What will her family say? His family, their friends, the church. She had no job. How would she cope? Where would she go? She did not know where to start. She collapsed and fell to the ground. Malik picked her up and poured some water on her mercilessly. After a while, she came back to her misery. When she regained consciousness, she began to beg her husband for another chance, but he yelled at her and started calling her barren. Malik walked towards the closet, packed his wife's clothes, and rolled the luggage out to the patio. He opened the door and ordered her to leave. Amina had no money, so she grabbed her husband and tried to make him change his mind. He refused. Amina called her friend Leela. On hearing the news, Leela rushed down there to pick her up. Leela drove her home. Amina sobbed uncontrollably and cried her heart out. She refused to be consoled. She had wasted 9 years of her life on a man, no love, no support, and no children. Malik had been a cheating husband just 2 years into their marriage. Her friend Leela advised her to cut her losses, but she insisted on restoring her marriage. She rushed to the church late that night, praying and crying for hours. She refused to leave the church. A few days later, she went to Malik's house to see if she could make him change his mind. She met the lawyer and Malik working on the divorce papers. She tried to make Malik change his mind, but Malik was adamant about his decision. Amina went back to Leela's house. She cried and prayed day in and day out for her marriage. Malik called his side chick Zara right after signing the divorce papers. Zara was very happy. It was the best news she had heard in a while. Malik packed a few clothes and went to stay with his side chick Zara and their children. While he was gone, Amina came to the house to talk to Malik. She wanted to beg him into changing his mind about the divorce, but he was not home. Amina decided to stay in Malik's house for 2 weeks, waiting for him. He came back to see her. He laughed so hard at her and wondered what she was doing there. After the divorce, we're no longer married in case you forgot, said Malik. The living room was cold and uninviting with the faint smell of dampness lingering in the air. Amina walked over to him to welcome him, but he yelled at her and pushed her away. He told her he was in love with another woman and they had children together. Amina felt like something had hit her in the head. The news broke her and she felt betrayed by her husband, Malik. She broke down in tears, wailing and crying, wishing it was a dream. She cried herself to sleep on the floor, and the next morning she woke up to a knock on the door. It was Zara and her 2 children. Zara had all their luggage, and they were moving into the house. Malik opened the door, and Zara introduced herself and the children to Amina and informed her of their plan to move in. Malik had married Zara barely a few days after signing his divorce papers. Amina slumped to the ground and sat. She did not believe it when Malik said he had 2 kids. She finally saw them. She was devastated at the betrayal she had faced for over 7 years. She couldn't believe her husband had another family outside their home. When Malik came home in the morning, Amina confronted him about Zara. Zara had moved into Malik's bedroom. Amina was left in the guest room. The following morning, as Amina was cooking in the kitchen, Zara walked in and pushed her out of the kitchen. The smell of onions and pepper filled the small space. Amina quietly left as she did not want to lose her cool. She grabbed her bag and went out to cool off. But when she returned, the locks were changed and she lost access to the house. She called Malik to inform him that she was locked out of the house, but Malik told her he was out of town on a business trip and told her to wait until he got back. Amina went to stay with Lila for a few days until Malik came back. She cried for days on end. She had sleepless nights and prayed day and night so God could restore her marriage. She lost interest in everything. A few days later, Malik came back home and Amina went to the house to see him. But when she got there, she was denied entry by both Malik and his new wife. She went back to Lila's house to stay with her. The following months were hell for Amina. She had lost everything. She had no interest in doing anything else. She cried and grieved her marriage for months. After a couple of months, Amina went to Malik's house to take the rest of her things. This time she was different. She was direct, firm, and very confident. She barely spoke a few words to Malik. She collected all her things and loaded them up in Leela's car. Malik was surprised and confused that Amina was no longer interested in begging him anymore. He tried to have a few conversations with Amina, but she was not interested. She excused herself and drove off with Leela. Leela took her to many fun places and kept her busy, so she could forget all about Malik. Leela was able to get her a job in her workplace. Amina had not worked since she got married, so she was very happy to have her new job. One morning, as they stepped out to go to work, Lila's car refused to start and they were running late. A man drove into the parking lot. He saw them struggling to start the car, so he approached and offered to drop them off at work. On his way to drop them off at work, he called his mechanic to go pick up the car and get it fixed. Amina was so grateful. The man Felix dropped them off at work and offered to pick them up after work. Leela declined. She came home from work to meet Felix outside her apartment waiting for her. Felix informed her that her car would be ready the following day, and he also offered to drop her off at work the next day. Leela smiled and declined. A few weeks later, Felix came by her apartment and rang the doorbell. Amina answered the door. Felix asked her about her car and then asked her out on a date. She hesitated, but Felix was persistent, so she agreed. Amina and Felix went out on a date, and it was the best time she had had in years. Felix was very funny. He made her laugh and smile the whole time. Amina was so happy and grateful. When she got home after the date, she told Leela all about the date. Amina and Felix kept seeing each other a few more times. Felix often told Amina how charming, calm, gentle, and sweet she was. She would laugh and giggle a lot, and she also made Felix laugh so much. Every time they met, they would talk for hours. They enjoyed each other's company. At Malik's house, life was different. Zara's maid quit her job, so there was no food. The house was dirty, and Zara was constantly asking for money. She was lazy and very expensive. She consistently asked Malik about his will and his businesses. She kept pushing for her and her children's names to be the next of kin. Malik thought that was strange, but did not pay much attention. His life was not going the way he thought it would. When he came home from work, he had to cook, clean, and take care of the children, while Zara stayed at home doing nothing all day. Malik started complaining, but Zara would shout down at him, "I am not a woman who tolerated all your nonsense. She gave you everything, yet you treated her like trash." Zara yelled at Malik, "Do not tempt my madness today. I am not Amina." Malik quietly walked away because he knew Zara had no tolerance. Meanwhile, at Amina's house, Amina was so happy with her new life. The cozy living room was filled with laughter as she invited Felix home to meet her friend Leela. They ate and talked for hours, sharing stories and jokes. Felix left. Things were moving so well and beautifully between Amina and Felix. He took her to all her favorite places, from quiet parks to bustling markets. They had so many fun dates together, and life was beautiful. Amina was getting her life back, and things were returning to normal for her. Amina was very caring and loving to Felix. She cooked for him and showed him so much love, care, and kindness, but she refused to sleep with him or let him kiss her. She had been scarred a lot, so this time she was taking her time. One day, as Felix, Amina, and Leela were at a restaurant eating and enjoying their time, Malik walked in. The clinking of silverware and the soft buzz of conversations filled the air. Malik saw Amina and walked toward her to talk down to her like he always did. He accused her of running into the arms of another man barely a few months after their marriage. Amina had had enough of Malik. She stood up to challenge Malik, and she accused him of not being able to father a child after years of marriage. He laughed and told her he had 2 children. Amina mocked him and said to him, "Do yourself a favor and get a dinner test." Malik frowned and was shocked at the accusation that he was not man enough to father a child. He froze and quietly walked out of the restaurant. As he got home, Zara asked him about the will again, but he snapped and yelled at her to back off. Zara was too interested in Malik's will, so much so that Amina's Dana accusation began to make sense in Malik's mind. He went to the doctor the following day to get tested only to find out that he couldn't father a child due to an infection that made him sterile. He was so surprised that he asked the doctor where the babies in his house came from. The doctor had no idea what he was talking about and advised him to get a DNA test. Malik crumbled into the chair and could not move. The doctor called his driver to take Malik home. The next day, Malik told Zara he was taking the children to get ice cream, and he took them to the doctor for DNA testing. A few days later, it was confirmed that the children's DNA did not match his. To make matters worse, it was confirmed that both children came from different men. When he got home, he packed all of Zara and the children's belongings and threw them outside. Malik was furious. He could not believe what his beloved side chick did to him. Zara was confused, so she began to argue. Malik became even more furious and he threw the test results at Zara. When Zara saw the results, she fell on her knees and begged Malik. In her defense, she said, "Yes, the children are not yours. I knew you couldn't father children because we had been together for 2 years and you could not get me pregnant, so I had to help you and get other men to get me pregnant to help you." Malik yelled. At this point, he lost it and landed a harsh slap across Zara's face. Malik wept inconsolably. The pain of betrayal was just too much. He trusted Zara wholeheartedly and could never imagine that she could do this to him. He grabbed her things, threw them out, and locked Zara out of the house. Zara sat by the door crying and begging for forgiveness, but Malik was silent. After a few hours with no success, Zara packed her things and left. Malik got in his car and drove down to Amina's house to beg her. He had lost his wife through his fault. The childlessness they had was all on him, but he had treated Amina with such disdain. When he got there, he rang the doorbell and someone opened the door. Felix came in on one knee, about to propose to Amina, while her friends were there to celebrate with her. Amina screamed and interrupted the proposal. Malik had lost his mind. He rushed in between them and punched Felix in the face. A fight erupted between the 2 men and the girls pulled them apart. Amina refused to leave. Malik begged and accepted all the insults hurled at him. He had lost so much and had nothing else to lose. He was willing to end it all there. Amina was stunned because she had never seen Malik that hopeless. She eventually agreed to go with him to his house to calm him down. Felix was in tears and begged Amina not to go, but she insisted because she was afraid of what Malik might do to himself. When they got to his house, she bathed him, cleaned the house, and made him dinner. Felix was devastated and felt abandoned, as though Amina had chosen Malik all over again. Amina apologized to Felix and asked for his forgiveness. Felix told her that he forgave her. Later that day, Amina returned to Felix's house. They didn't hear her coming. Felix and Leela, childhood best friends, were talking. Leela had convinced Felix to date Amina and help her heal from her pain. Amina overheard the conversation and realized they had set her up with Felix without her consent. Amina was shocked. She quietly entered the house feeling betrayed and disappointed by her friend Leela. Both Leela and Felix tried to explain, saying they didn't mean to hurt her, but Amina silently turned around and left. Tired of defending herself and fighting for both her relationship and friendship, she decided she was done. She stayed in a hotel for the weekend. Felix tried calling her for days, but Amina refused to pick up. After some days, when she was no longer upset, she returned home to reconcile with Felix. Shortly after, Malik called Amina and asked her to come to his house. She dressed up and went to meet him. When she arrived, she found that he had cooked and decorated the entrance to the dining area with rose petals and candles. Amina walked in, and in her heart she wished Malik had done this when they were married. I wish he was kind and caring in our marriage, she thought to herself. She sat down cautiously. Malik came from behind her and knelt down. Amina turned around and saw him with a ring box. Malik proposed to her again, saying, "Remember how you wanted the marriage. I am willing to give you another chance. I don't want all you invested to go to waste. Let's try again." Amina stared at him in shock. "You haven't changed. You're still mean and wicked," she said. "You think you're doing me a favor by marrying me? No. Being married to you was torture, and divorcing you was a blessing to my life." Her voice rose in anger. Malik, as usual, avoided taking responsibility for anything he had done. Esther gave him a stern look, got up, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the house. At the door, she turned around and said, "Goodbye, Malik. Never call or come near me again." Malik rushed to the door to stop her, but she was already gone. Esther drove straight to Felix's house. When she arrived, she saw Felix sitting outside, devastated, unsure if she would ever return. As she opened the gate, he saw her. She ran to him, and he was overjoyed to see her. She jumped into his arms and kissed him. Then she said, "Yes, I will marry you." Felix was ecstatic. He carried her into the house to celebrate their engagement. They called Leela to share the good news. This story teaches a powerful lesson about respect, integrity, and the consequences of our actions in relationships. Malik's selfishness, infidelity, and disregard for those who cared for him led to betrayal, heartbreak, and loneliness. On the other hand, Amina's journey from pain to self-discovery demonstrates the importance of self-worth and resilience. The story reminds us to value relationships by prioritizing love, attention, and respect for our partners. It highlights that dishonesty and living a double life ultimately lead to regret and suffering. Amina's eventual happiness shows that healing is possible when we stop tolerating disrespect and choose to embrace our value. Finally, the narrative teaches that our actions have consequences, and the pain we inflict on others often returns in unexpected ways. In the end, love built on trust, kindness, and mutual respect will always prevail over deceit and selfishness. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring and thought-provoking videos. Stay tuned for more exciting content. Zuba Street was like any other small street in Lagos, alive with the sounds of people going about their daily business, children playing, and neighbors sharing gossip. It was a place where everyone knew everyone's name, and no secret stayed hidden for long. At every corner, people greeted each other with a smile or a friendly wave. and no one ever passed by without saying good morning or good afternoon. Among the familiar faces was Papan So, the elderly man who had lived on Zuba and Timmy Street for as long as anyone could remember. Every morning, he sat outside his small bungalow, his transistor radio playing softly as he sipped from his cup of hot pape. His bungalow, painted a fading shade of yellow, stood out with its neatly swept compound and the scent of flowers from his small garden. Papa Anso wasn't just another resident, he was the unofficial watchman of the street. If something unusual was happening, you could be sure that Papa Anso would be the first to notice and the first to spread the news. There was also Adais, a young woman who helped her mother run a small provision shop on the street. Adais was known for her quick smile and friendly attitude. Udi, she greeted everyone who walked past. And if you didn't greet her back, she'd call after you. Ah, brother, you no fit greet. Her cheerful voice echoed in the mornings as she arranged goods in front of the shop, the scent of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. At the end of the street stood a small amala joint run by Mama Itoro. Though new to the area, she had quickly become a part of the Zuba and Timmy Street community. From the day she arrived, her cooking had drawn in a crowd. Her amala, gebegiri, and yudu were so good that people came from nearby streets just to get a taste. The wooden benches outside the shop were often filled with customers, their laughter mingling with the aroma of spices. But as peaceful as Zuba and Timmy Street appeared, something strange was happening, something that nobody but the dogs seemed to notice. Mr. Ekanem, who lived in the house right next to the Amala shop, had two large dogs. Normally, they were quiet and friendly, wagging their tails at familiar faces and barking only when strangers passed by. But ever since Mama Itoro and her family arrived, the dogs had changed. Every time they passed the dog's gate, the animals barked fiercely, growling and pacing, as though they were in the presence of something dangerous. At first, Mr. Ekanem thought it was just the dogs being protective of their territory. But soon, it became clear that something was unsettling the animals. The more the family came and went from the shop, the more agitated the dogs became. Their barking often started just as the sun was setting, echoing through the street and making the neighbors glance uneasily at one another. At first, nobody took note of the dogs barking. For months after they arrived, Mama Itoro's Amala joint was the most popular place on Zuba and Timmy Street. From the early hours of the morning, the smell of hot amala cooking on the stove would fill the air, drawing people in like bees to honey. It wasn't just the food that people loved, it was the atmosphere. There was something comforting about sitting on the wooden benches outside the small shop, eating a plate of amala with gebegiri and assorted meats, and watching the world go by. Mama Itoro was a short, plump woman, always with a smile on her face and a warm greeting for everyone who passed by. She worked alongside her two daughters and a young man, whom many assumed was her son. The girls were quiet, always working quickly and efficiently, while the boy handled the money and served the customers. Together, they ran the joint like a well-oiled machine. People from all over the area came to buy food. Papa so made it a point to stop by at least twice a week. He liked to sit on the benches outside, listening to his radio and enjoying his meal. Even Adaise, who was always busy at her mother's shop, would find time to stop by and grab a plate. "This amala is magic," she'd say, licking her fingers after every meal. Even though the family didn't talk much, people felt at ease around them. They never caused any trouble, and they kept their shop clean and tidy. It was the perfect business, and it seemed like nothing could go wrong. The amala was soft, the gebigiri was perfectly seasoned, and the customers were happy. But while the people of Zuba and Taimi Street enjoyed their meals without a second thought, Mr. Ekanem's dogs had a different opinion. Every time Mama Itoro or one of her children walked past, the dogs would bark furiously, their sharp barks cutting through the air. They seemed to sense something that the rest of the street couldn't. I don't know why these dogs keep barking at them, Mr. Ekanem said one day, shaking his head. They've never acted like this before. His dogs were usually calm and friendly. They'd seen the family every day for months, and yet their reaction never changed. Every time the family passed by, the barking started up again, as if the dogs were warning the street about something no one else could see. If only these dogs could talk, Mr. Ekanem muttered to himself one evening as the dogs barked uncontrollably once again. But to everyone else, Mama Itoro and her family seemed perfectly ordinary. They ran their shop, greeted their customers, and went about their business like everyone else. Nobody thought twice about it. As the days went by, however, something subtle began to change. The joint was still busy, but there was a growing unease in the air that nobody could quite explain. Little by little, things started to feel different. At first, the changes were so small that nobody really noticed. People still came to Mama Itoro's Amala joint, enjoyed their meals, and exchanged small talk as they ate. The joint remained as popular as ever. But slowly, something started to shift. The warmth that used to fill the small shop began to fade, and the family's behavior became more distant, more unsettling. It began with the greetings. Mama Itoro had always been one of the most polite people on the street. Every morning, she would greet everyone who passed by her shop, her voice full of energy, her smile bright. Her two daughters and the young man who worked with her would always follow her lead, nodding and greeting the customers as they set up for the day. It was something that everyone on Zuba and Timi Street appreciated. Greetings were an essential part of the culture. But one day, Adeyes noticed something odd. She passed by the shop on her way to the provision store, as she always did, and waved at Mama Itoro. "Good morning, Mama Itoro." She called out cheerfully, but this time there was no reply. Mama Itoro didn't look up, didn't smile. She didn't even seem to hear Adeyes. Adeyes frowned. Maybe she didn't hear me, she thought. So she tried again the next day. This time, the same thing happened, no response. Mama Itoro's daughters, usually quick to greet, just continued with their work, their faces blank, their eyes avoiding contact with anyone who passed. It wasn't just Adeyes. Other people on the street started to notice as well. One by one, they began to whisper among themselves. The air felt heavier, as if the street itself had become burdened with an invisible weight. Papa Anso, who sat outside his house every day listening to his radio, noticed the change too. "These people have stopped greeting," he said one afternoon, scratching his head. "Before, they would greet me every morning. Now, they just walk by like they don't see me." "I thought it was just me," Adeyes replied. "I greet them every day, but they act like I'm invisible." At first, people tried to make excuses for them. Maybe they were tired. Running an Amala joint wasn't easy, after all. But the strange behavior continued, and as the days went by, the family became even more withdrawn. The once lively chatter that used to spill out from the shop was replaced by an eerie silence that made even the busiest days feel unsettling. They no longer spoke to the customers the way they used to. They served the food, took the money, and went back to their work in silence. Even when the shop was busy, the atmosphere felt cold, almost eerie. The warm smiles that had once greeted everyone were gone, replaced by a rigid politeness that felt rehearsed. And the dogs, Mr. Ekenem's dogs, noticed it too. If anyone should have gotten used to Mama Itoro's family, it was the dogs. They saw them every day, heard their voices, and watched them move back and forth from the house to the shop. But instead of growing accustomed to their presence, the dogs seemed more agitated than ever. Every morning, when Mama Itoro and her children passed by on their way to open the shop, the dogs would bark furiously. Their growls were low and menacing, their barks sharp and relentless. They barked so loudly that it disturbed the entire street. It wasn't just one bark and then silence, it was continuous, as if the dogs were trying to send a message. A warning? I don't know what's wrong with these dogs, Mr. Ekenem muttered one evening, shaking his head in frustration. They've never acted like this before. Every day it's the same thing. As soon as that family walks by, they go crazy. It wasn't normal, and Mr. Ekenem knew it. His dogs had always been friendly, calm even, around strangers. But something about Mama Itoro's family was different. Adiziz, standing outside her mother's provision shop, watched the scene unfold one morning. The dogs barked violently, pacing back and forth behind the gate, their eyes locked on the family as they passed by. Yet Mama Itoro and her children didn't seem bothered at all. They didn't flinch, didn't even look in the direction of the dogs. They walked silently to the shop, opened the door, and began their day as usual. What is it with these dogs? Adayez asked, turning to her mother, who stood beside her. I don't know, but it's not normal. Dogs don't bark like that for no reason. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers on Zuba and Timmy Street grew louder. People who had once adored the Amala joint now felt uneasy. The food was still as delicious as ever, but the warmth and friendliness that had once defined the place were gone. The shop was busy, but it felt cold, lifeless. Customers noticed that the family barely spoke to each other anymore, and when they did, it was in hushed tones in a language nobody on the street recognized. They're not Yoruba, Papan, so said one day, speaking to a group of men who gathered outside his house. I've been listening to them, and the language they speak. It's not Yoruba. It's not Hausa or Igbo either. I don't know what it is. The men nodded in agreement. It was another strange piece of the puzzle that nobody could figure out. The conversations grew more speculative, each theory more far-fetched than the last. As the mystery deepened, so did the tension on Zuba and Timmy Street. The dogs continued their relentless barking, and people continued to whisper, wondering what had changed. Why had the family become so distant? Why were the dogs so disturbed by them? Was there something they were hiding? Nobody had the answers, but one thing was clear, something was wrong with the Amala sellers. The people couldn't see it, but the dogs could. And if only they knew what the dogs were trying to say. As the weeks passed, the unease on Zuba and Timi Street grew stronger. Mama Itoro's Amala joint, once the bustling center of the neighborhood, still drew customers, but people began to speak in hushed tones about the strange changes that had taken over the family. There was something odd about the way they lived, something that didn't sit right with anyone who paid attention. For one thing, people began to realize that Mama